this lesson. 5 words. The first word is curiosity. Okay, and when I think of a person that's curious, we've all heard the expression, get out of the box. Now let me tell you the good news. The crisis gets you out of the box. We're all out of the box right now. In fact, the crisis blows up the box. You don't even have to walk out. It's just all of a sudden, the box that you were in, it's gone. That baby is blown to smithereens, and you kind of look around and you've been blindsided, and you say, wow, what in the heck happened? Well, the crisis took the box from us. Let me give you a quote that I love by Sir Francis Bacon. He said, if a person will begin with certainties, he will end up with doubts, but if he will be content to begin with doubts, he will end up in certainties. And what's happened is once we get out of the box, we get out of familiar territory, and we get into the uncertainty territory of our life. I understand that. In fact, the older I get, the more uncertainties, to be honest with you, that I have. And it's okay. It's okay. When I was young, I was really good. When I was young, I just had answers. Anybody, you have a question, I'll give you an answer. I was just a good old choleric, and I had answers for everything, for everybody, and in every place. And I was just kind of like Mr. Answer Man. But as I live through life, life is difficult. And all the things that I thought were black and white, a lot of it, they're just, to be honest with you, they're gray. And I found that the older I've got, the less certainties I've had. And that's okay. It's okay, because a lot of that chaff needed to be blown away for me to have the firm foundation I have today. Here's what I do know. Today I have fewer certainties than I've ever had before. But the ones I have, I'm more certain about them than I ever have been before. They've been tried. They've been through the fire. They've been tested. They've been proven. And I'm just sharing with you today that, wow, the uncertainties that we have around us, I'm pretty good with uncertainties. You see, I've learned that's not a problem. That uncertainties always drive me to the things that I'm certain about, my values and my faith. And that just becomes an anchor. You see, at an early age, when I was younger, I wanted to know everything. And so I was always asking, how long will it take before I get all of my knowledge? And today, I just know I don't need to know everything. I just need to grow in everything. There's a lot of difference between knowing everything and growing in it. And now it's kind of like, how far can I go? And see, people's desires, they're saying during the crisis, oh my gosh, can we return back to normal? When are we going to have normal? And basically what they're asking is, can I go back to the box? I want to get back in the box. You don't want to get back in the box. You see, that box is filled with all kind of limitations. That box is filled with all kind of assumptions that aren't helping you. And inside the box, I know it's easy because it's automatic, but you're not growing in the box. And so the best thing that's happened during the crisis is the box has been blown up. And now you're on the detour. And I just want to challenge you, if you're on the detour, embrace the detour tour. Embrace it. Learn from it. Grow from it. You're going to meet people you would have never met if you wouldn't have been on the detour. You're going to see things you would have never seen. You're going to have opportunities that you would never have presented to you if you wouldn't have been on the detour tour. So stay on it. Stay curious. That curiosity will just allow you to expand and grow and develop yourself. It's a huge word. Now, I'm going to talk to you in a moment about some other words. And I'm going to teach you what we call in the John Maxwell Team Company, the circle of success. It's a cycle. It's a cycle of success. And it has 5 words in it. So these are words that we're adding to the words that you need to know today to maximize your potential right now so you can prepare yourself for the future. So let's go through these words. The first word in our circle of success in our John Maxwell Team, which is our coaching company that we hope that you'll become a part of, the first word is test. And whenever we test all the time, by the way. And whenever we're testing, what we're really saying is, we know there's a better way. When we're testing, we're saying we know that there is always an answer. And maybe we don't have the answer yet, and maybe we have a way, but it's not the best way. Testing means there's just a better way. And by the way, I was talking to someone the other day, a leader, about the coronavirus and our crisis that we're in. And I said to him, this is the greatest day of testing I've ever seen in my life, because people are so fearful, they're so panicked, they're so uncertain, that you can test anything right now and you can get by with it. Because we're hearing all kind of predictions. Some of them are true, some of them are not true, some of them are really way out. I mean, you can say, start throwing mud on the wall. Nobody, during safe, secure times when you want to do something a little different, people say, wait, what are you doing? We've already figured out how to be successful, which you haven't, but you think you have. But during times when you're in the deepest valley and it's the darkest, people will let you test. In fact, they're willing to test. They're just throwing mud on the wall saying, what's going to stick? What will work? So there's never been a better testing time than right now. In fact, as I'm doing this teaching to you, literally last month, just through social media, we reached 1.6 million people in my teaching. Last year, in personal appearances, I only reached 1.2 million. In other words, in 1 month, by testing, by doing something totally different than what I've done before, I reached in 1 month more than I reached an entire year last year. That's the beauty about throwing it out there, testing it. I had a mentor for several years, a wonderful man. His name was Bill, and he would come to me and he would, many times in our conversations, look at me and say, John, when's the last time you did something for the first time? He was trying to keep me creative. He's trying to keep me testing and getting out of the box and staying curious. When's the last time you did something the first time? Now, when he was asking you that question, he was talking about what are you adding to your life that you don't have in your life that's going to make you better? That's what that question's all about. Well, I have a question for you today. When's the last time you did something for the last time? Yeah. When's the last time you did something for the last time? In other words, you said, that didn't work any better. That didn't work anymore. That doesn't satisfy me. Now, that's all about subtraction. Bill's question was addition. When's the last time you did something for the first time? In other words, what are you creating and building? But I'm asking, when's the last time you did something for the last time? What are you losing? What are you letting go? So what are you getting rid of so that you can be better tomorrow? What's held you back? When I turned 17 and knew that I was going to be a speaker all of my life, my father, who, by the way, is still alive today, he's 98. My dad, who is also a speaker and very, very successful, said to me, John, if you're going to be a good speaker, he said, you got to put well in the water so that whenever you go to the water, you have water. You go to the well, you have water to pull out. In other words, he said, you got to resource yourself well. And he told me, he said, file every day, read every day. And so at 17, I started reading and filing every day and literally have done it all my life. Just a few years ago, about 5 now, I was looking at those filing cabinets with thousands of articles that had been written and tens of thousands of quotes. I mean, if you do it every day and you do it for, 50 years, after a while, you just become pretty amazing. And I would go to those files when I was going to write or book or teach on a subject, and I'd pull out material and I'd get it and I would use it. And one day I began to realize I was relying way too much on those files, that I wasn't as creative and I wasn't testing what I should be testing, because I had a safety net. I go over there and, well, here I got this. And I was starting to read old thoughts, and old thoughts are old thoughts. They're not relevant. They're not new. They're not fresh. They don't breathe. There's no fire and passion in them. And I made a decision, a very difficult decision, all of my work for all those years of filing. I made a decision to get rid of all of it. And I didn't tell anybody. I didn't even tell my wife, Margaret, because I was afraid I would back out. And to be honest with you, this is a huge step for me. I can still remember, we were living in a condo. I can still remember the day when Margaret was gone, and I looked over those files, and I called up one of the service people, one of the bellmen there at the place where we stayed, and I showed him those cabinets. I said, I gave him $200. I said, I'm going to do me a favor, get rid of those. I'm going to be gone for 2 hours. Just, I don't care what you do with them. You can, dump them, do whatever you want, but just, I don't want them here when I'm back. And so I took my time and left for a couple hours, came back, and he had done exactly what I asked. The cabinets were all gone. And then all of a sudden, I looked and I saw all of my work that I had expended, and I literally, where those cabinets were standing, I sat down right there and I wept like a baby for 15 minutes because I realized I had just let go of so much of what I had held on to. Now, I'm just going to say to you, one of the good things about a crisis is it begins to help us to let go of the things that we have depended on the past so that we can go to an entire new level of living. I'm more creative today than I would have been if I'd have had those files. I test more than I would have been because what? That was a crutch to me. I was holding on to what I knew instead of letting go so I could grab hold of what I could become. So that's a huge word right now. Just be testing. That it's going to make you the person you need to be during this time. Okay, we're back to the cycle, the circle of success. Test is the top, and then fail. Testing says that there's a better way, and failing says, I haven't found that way. You test and you, oops, I thought that might work. It didn't work. But let me tell you something. Failing tells you that, I haven't found that way, but it also tells you, but I'm getting closer to finding that way because I've just tried something that I found didn't work. It's the Thomas Edison thing. It's old, it's worn, but it really is greatly true. And when he said about the incandescent light bulb, and he had over 9,000 tests and failures, and he said, I'm just 9,000 steps closer to discovering and getting what I want to have. What he knew is you if you test a lot, you're going to fail a lot. That's just the way of doing it. Wow. I wrote a book called Failing Forward several years ago. And I just love the title of the book because it was giving the picture of failure, yes, but when we failed forward. In other words, wow, we made an advance. Okay, we have to get back up, but if you're 5.5 feet every time you fall, you get back up. You could have gained 5.5 feet, and the failing forward is a beautiful picture of the fact that I'm testing, I'm failing, but I'm getting better even in the process of that. And one of the things I teach is the fact that you're never good the first time. I'm always amazed when people come to me and they say, well, I'm really working hard. I'm really practicing here. I've never done this before. I'm writing my first book. Oh my gosh, I really want it to be a great book. And I look at them and I want that for them too, but that's not reality. I guess in a fatherly way, I try to pull them aside and just help them understand that this is true of me, this is true of you. It's true of all of us. We're never good the first time, but we just aren't. We want to be good. We practice to be good, but we haven't done it enough to be good yet. If you're trying to develop a skill, the first time isn't a good time. It's a difficult time because you've never done that before, and it's okay. And that's part of this process of testing and failing that we're never good. I just finished last week what will become my 4th book. And it's entitled Change Your World. It's not going to be out for about a year. But I worked so hard on that book. And I rewrote it. Hang on. Me and my writing team rewrote the book 6 times. Yeah, we did. It was the first time, and it was okay. So we said, okay, now what? Let's start upgrading. So the second time, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time. Now I'm not a novice writer. I've been an author for since 1979. I've got writing down pretty good. I really do. 6 times. 6 times. I don't want us to miss this. That the more we test, the more we fail. But what I really don't want us to miss is the fact that that's part of this process, and that testing and failing have got to be linked just like success has to be linked to them. And I'll come back to that in a moment because right now, wow, I love sports and we're all going crazy with the quarantine and no sports basically. And I'll be honest with you, I don't love sports enough to watch the 1987 Collegiate National Championship basketball game. Honestly, once it's over, it's kind of over for me. So I'm not watching much sports. And so what are we all doing on ESPN? We're watching the Last Dance with Michael Jordan. Yeah, we are, because it's at least it's fresh material, and what an incredible athlete he was. But here's what I love about Michael Jordan. You saw the advertisement, I'm sure, sometime in your life. Probably the greatest basketball player ever. And what does he say? In one of his commercials, he said, I've missed over 9,000 shots. I've lost 300 games, and the 26 times I've missed the game-winning shot. In fact, Michael Jordan probably has missed more game-winning shots than any person that ever lived, and yet he's probably the greatest basketball player that ever lived. And what do I want to teach you out of this? It's very simple. You cannot, you will not, you should not, you never should separate failure from success. They're inseparable. There is no one that has ever been successful without having a lot of failure in that journey. It's just part of the path you take. And somehow we've tried to isolate it and put success over here and failure over here and say, these two things that they should never meet again. Wow. Don't separate them. They belong together. In fact, it's out of our failures that we have a humility that allows us to have a great center that allows us to take that success and be more balanced in it. And it's just you've got to go through failure to get to success. You just have to. There's no other. You don't bypass failure and say, I don't want failure and disappointment. I just like to get to the no. You got to go through it. You got to go through failure to get to success. So we're learning some words that are maximizing us right now. Test, fail. Here's the next word, learn. And by the way, the value of failure is that you're learning something from it. So when anybody talks about failure in their life, the question I always ask them in that failure is, talk to me. What have you learned? Because that's absolutely huge. What have you and I learned? And what are you and I learning through the coronavirus right now, through this crisis? What are we learning? In the Peanuts cartoon, Charlie Brown, he's at the beach and he's spent the whole day and he's carefully built a pretty amazing castle in the sand, and he's standing back and he's looking at it and he's just admiring it. And all of a sudden, the big waves come in and a storm comes in and just goes over the castle and engulfs the whole castle. And all at once, all of his artwork, all of his time, all of his effort, it's all just with one wave washed away. And he's standing now before where this castle was, this just smooth place of sand. And where his artwork stood, it's all gone. Everything's gone. And he's saying to himself, there must be a lesson here, but I don't know what it is. Well, that's Charlie Brown. He always knew there was a lesson. He just wasn't sure what it was. Well, in this time of crisis, there is a lesson. But you want to advance a little bit beyond Charlie. You want to stay with it long enough to ask yourself, what am I learning from it? Wow. I'm learning a lot from it. I'm learning a lot about myself. I'm learning that I need more time for creativity than I've given it. I'm at a max creative time in my life right now, but I know why. It's because I have time to be creative. I need to have some margins in my life for my health. This has been good for me. I'm learning. I'm having to make changes. I know you are too. I know you are. Let me give you another word that will help maximize us during this crisis, and that is the word improve. Yeah. And by the way, just like the value of failure is that we learn from it, the value of learning is that we improve out of it. If learning by itself there's not much value in learning. I mean, if you want to know something, just get on your iPhone and ask Siri. She'll tell you. Learning is you learn something so that you can improve. Wow. Here's what I believe. Everyone can improve. You can improve. I can improve. Everything can be improved. I believe that. Everything. No matter what you're doing, everything can be improved. And I believe that every day has improvement possibilities. Every day. Today is another day where you and I can improve. One of my favorite stories on improvement comes from my friends at Chick-fil-A. Great people. I've had some wonderful training, teaching moments with them. And there was a time, this goes back, maybe 18, 20 years ago, when the Boston market was starting to maybe cut in a little bit to Chick-fil-A's profits and market share. And so the board was talking about the fact that we need to get bigger. We need to get bigger. And Truett Cathy, the founder, who's now passed away, what an incredible man he was. Truett Cathy looked at the board as they're saying, got to get bigger, got to get bigger. And he looked at him and said, don't worry about getting bigger. Just worry about getting better. And trust me, he said, if we get better, the customers will make sure we get bigger. They'll demand that we get bigger. And I thought to myself, he understood the value of improvement. A book that I read really in my high school years that marked me greatly was a book by James Allen. And James Allen, As a Man Thinketh, was the title of the book. He wrote this statement that just has been sealed in my heart for so many years. He said, people are anxious to improve their circumstances, but they're not anxious to improve themselves. Now get the picture. They're anxious to improve their circumstances. Let's get rid of the crisis. Let's get over the crisis. When's the crisis going to be? That's all circumstances, folks. They're anxious to get the crisis gone, fix the crisis, remove the crisis, whatever. Get the crisis out of my life. They're anxious to improve their circumstances. What they're not anxious to do is improve themselves. And so what does he say? He said, because they don't improve themselves, they remain bound. I don't want us to remain bound out of this crisis. I want us to be freed out of that crisis entirely differently than that. So during this crisis, I gave you a challenge, and that is focus on improving yourself more than improving your circumstances. Again, that's why I'm giving you these one words that will maximize you today to prepare you for tomorrow. So am I improving? Am I improving? Am I improving in my humility, adaptability, open-handedness, my discussions with my peers? Am I improving in my questions, my reflections, my curiosity, my testing, my failing, my learning? Am I improving in these areas? I'll just give me a couple more minutes because there's another word I want to introduce to you right now, and that is the word re-enter. It's a great word. Now notice the cycle of success. Test, fail, learn, improve, re-enter. Now when do you re-enter? When do you get back in the game? After you've tested, failed, learned, and improved. You know, in America, we just love a tenacious person, and we love a person that's just always in the fight, and they just stay in the game. And, you know, it's kind of like they rise up and they hit an obstacle, and they go back down, and they just keep getting back up, and we just look at them and say, oh, what a tenacious person. Boy, they're never down. They're either up or they're getting up. And let me tell you, this is not a picture of a tenacious person. This is a picture of a stupid person. Let me make a suggestion. While you're down, stay down until you have figured out why you keep getting knocked down. You see, the only time to re-enter the game is when you've learned from your failures and improved on what you've learned. Once I get better, I can get back into the game. And, you know, I just real quickly suggest again that if you want to kind of get into a new game, maybe a new career, if you'll again go to coachwithjohn.com, go to that website, we'll have a little webinar that'll teach you how to kind of get started on the journey and perhaps even, you know, get the skills to be a John Maxwell coach. I would love to have you. Okay. One more word, and I close, and that's prayer. And you may not be a person of faith, and you know me now. You know me. I tell you this all the time. Doesn't ever matter to me. I love you unconditionally, regardless of background, religion. Doesn't matter. Those things are not important to me. The only thing that's important to me is you. I value you. But the serenity prayer is such a terrific prayer for crisis, and as you know, it's used in so many incredible forums where people are trying to improve their life, Alcoholics Anonymous, etc. I mean, it's just a great prayer, and I just close with it, and I'll read it to you. And you can just kind of listen along, and it just very simply says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's what I pray for you right now. It's what I pray for myself. Help us to understand the things we cannot change and have the courage to do the things we can to change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I'm glad you're with me today. My name's John, and I'm your friend.
Well, today's topic, I love this word. Today's topic, we're going to talk about the miracle skill of curiosity. Now, I'm intrigued about the miracle skill. We'll get to that in just a minute. But I do love the word curiosity as a leader. I think it's an important skill that we should really possess and develop on a continual basis. Now, why do you call it the miracle skill?
I just have looked at everything that we're trying to teach, and especially 5 levels about developing influence with people. I'm a senior leader. I've got all this positional power, and I've got the title, but I really want to develop relationships and influence with people. And I'm just finding that without curiosity, it just comes back to it's the miracle skill that says if I can just be curious, it drives humility, it drives teachableness, it drives approachableness. It to me in so many ways that if I'm not curious, I tend not to listen so much. I tend to talk more. I tend to not ask many questions. I tend to think I have all the answers. I tend to think I'm the only. You just do what I say, and it just without curiosity, I feel like it drives me back to being the boss, level 1. With curiosity, it helps me engage the team, engage the minds of the team, and it helps take us to innovation, creativity, and change are invoked through curiosity. Have I made my case?
Yeah,
Are you on board? Are you with me? Can I get an amen?
I almost feel like this ought to be inspiring leaders. I feel like I'm inspired after that. You know, it's interesting. I think even those that are listening or watching, you can just feel Perry's intensity about this. But what it is I was just thinking about this. You have spent so much time lately on a course we just created for teams and for organizations, and it is turning a lot of heads and helping a lot of people. And it's the generational diversity, and it's based off of Tim Elmore's new book, New Kind of Diversity. I would encourage you. I gave you the maxwellleadership.com/podcast early in the episode. If you're interested in learning more about that generational diversity development and that course for your team, I'd encourage you to go fill out that form, make a note that you want to know a little bit more about that, and we'll get in touch with you in regards to that. But you've been in this and immersed in it. Matter of fact, just yesterday, you spent an entire day with 30-plus people talking about this topic and the power of it. And so I think being curious, especially when there's so many different generations in the workforce, is really the only way that we can learn, grow, and influence. And so I've heard you talk about the shifts that curiosity enables leaders. So let me talk about a couple of these shifts, and I'm going to throw it back to you and let you respond off of that. Right. So these shifts make us more teachable and more approachable. And so we are able to shift from, when we're curious, shift from telling to asking. We're able to shift from judging to accepting. We can shift from blaming to non-blaming. We can shift from excluding to including. And then finally, we're able to shift, when we're curious, from one perspective to diverse perspectives.
Yeah, and one thing that got me on this topic was we were talking about curiosity, and I wasn't totally bought into it. And I thought definitely it's a skill. It's better to have it than not have it. But I just said, so all you were talking about is asking more questions, right? So you're just saying I should ask more questions. They said, isn't that what curiosity means? And they said, no, it's not. This was what blew my head up. They said, when you're asking questions, you're trying to get the other person to tell you they know something, to prove they know something. But if you're curious, you're trying to learn something. And I just thought about that for a bit. I go, wow. And I'm in the professional question asking business.
Yes, you are.
And I'm asking a lot of questions trying to get you to prove that you know something, when I could actually use the exact same question, and you can either preface it with, I'm curious. Tell me how you got into this line of work. I'm not trying to get you to prove you know how you got into this line of work. I really am interested. I'm kind of curious. I want to learn about you. How did you get into this line of work? And so it could be the exact same words, but my tone and my delivery when I'm curious, someone says, I wonder, how did you solve this problem with our customer? I'm curious. How did you come up with that?
Yeah.
Not, how'd you come up with that answer? Just prove it to me. No, I'm curious.
Yeah.
I want to learn for myself. So
Yeah.
I think when you are curious, you send a message to the team that while I have a point of view, and I'm pretty sure it's a good point of view because it's mine, I'm interested in your point of view.
Yeah.
And I would like to hear from you. I'm teachable was the big word for me there. And it encourages the people on my team to have a point of view because they know when I come, I'm going to say, I'm curious, how would you do this if you were me?
Yeah.
I'm curious, does this fit into the way you see our direction that we're going? And it just enhances the engagement that I have with the team. I think it improves productivity because people come prepared. They know that I'm not just going to rubber stamp things. I want to be curious. Are we moving in the right direction? Are we doing the right things? Could there be a better way? I'm open to your thoughts. It just has so many. It's the miracle.
Yeah, I love it. I really wondered how you came up with that, but I agree. And it's funny. As you were talking, I'm like, man, you do that all the time, and I see you live this out. We could be anywhere. We could be in a meeting with one other individual. We could be with our team. We could be with a client in the organization. And you go, hey, I do have a point of view, but I would love to know your point of view, right? And it's not because you want their point of view and then you're going to change your point of view. You truly are curious and want to understand kind of where they're coming from. So I see you live that out. I love that.
Do it at home too, because I can be, I've been told I can be intimidating. But I don't mean to be. So that's why I say making people feel something. Maybe if I just became more curious, and I can't remember if it comes up here, but Tim Elmore said, you can talk like you're right, but listen like you're wrong.
That's so good.
Could I just be more, I have a point of view, but I'm curious. What's your point of view? And then I listen to you talk as if, teach me. I could be wrong. And I thought, well, when Tim said that here on this podcast table, I was, whoa, that is huge.
There's a huge difference.
You know?
Yeah, and there's a huge difference between asking questions and being curious. I love that. So let's jump in and talk about, well, how do we improve the skill of curiosity? The first one that we want you to understand is that curious leaders must develop their self-awareness. And fully self-aware leaders are, aware of their strengths and their weaknesses. Didn't happen by chance, or it wasn't easy, but they become aware of that. They've grown and learned that. And while they may know many things, they don't know everything. And so we need to make sure that from a posture of, man, we want to grow, we want to learn, and I think John says it something of this, which is, hey, when I'm done learning, I'm done, right? Like I'm going to learn till the day that I'm done. And I think that's just a posture we have to have. And so part of that is learning about yourself. And so you must continue, if you're going to be curious, to develop your self-awareness.
Hello, this is John C. Maxwell. I've been teaching leadership for over 40 years. We're gathering in Atlanta for our 10th Live to Lead Leadership Conference Friday, October the 6th. And I want to personally invite you to join us. Live to Lead is about empowering you to live out leadership, not just learn it. World-class leaders, Kendra Scott and Marcus Buckingham and Ryan Leake, will be joining me to impart wisdom, inspire change, and to help you lead more effectively. Hey, bring your team. Groups of 10 or more receive a significant discount. So let's grow together, because leadership isn't a solo journey. It's best experienced in community with others. Visit livetolead.com today, and let's make leadership a lived experience.
Yeah, I think this to me is this alone just drives teachability, that you are self-aware enough to know that your own strengths and your own weaknesses, you also know your effect on other people, and you know what you bring and what you don't bring to the conversation.
Yeah.
And so I love this ability by being curious to say, go back to talk like I'm right. I think I'm right, but I could be wrong. It's that self-awareness that I have some strengths, but I also have some weaknesses. I also have some blind spots, and I'm aware of that, even though I may not be aware of every blind spot. I know I have them. So if I could just be curious and listen more and understand your point of view, I might learn something about myself.
Yeah.
But you have to be self-aware to do that. Another thing is that curious leaders are really never satisfied with the status quo. They embrace that curiosity of asking, I wonder how we can improve this. I'm curious, how do you see this? Could we do this better? You're really good at that. I know you have a strong point of view on how we do things, but you never stop there. You always, and we have this smart team that we work on, and you're asking the people that handle the administrative side, you're asking the people that are in front of the customers, you're asking, how can we do this better? I'm curious, what's your point of view?
Yeah. We talk about change as leaders and as we lead teams. And one of the ways that you can never be satisfied with status quo is always be thinking about, not for just change's sake, but how do we change what we're doing in order to continue to get better and strive to be able to do that. Another idea to increase your curiosity is to create a learning culture. Leaders with curious mindset view every experience, good, bad, whatever it might be, as a learning experience. I love this. John, even down to his grandkids, they go on vacation once a year. And it is a great time, family time, but he's like, what did you learn? Let's evaluate the experience. I know we all had a lot of fun. Let's evaluate it now. And what did we learn? I think also when you think about this, let's go back to this question, asking questions. We do need to ask questions. They're essential into uncovering. I think it's the tone and the posture and the thought behind those questions that are really driving the curiosity, so that we can then learn, grow, not settle for status quo, but then continue to have a better outcome. One of the questions that I wrote down here that I was thinking about in creating a learning culture is, we talk a lot about, hey, we do we kind of diagnose when we're working on things and we're doing things. We go through projects. One of the questions I would challenge us to start thinking about as listeners and our viewers is, as you go through these projects or things you're working on as a company, ask this question once it's over with. What happened on this project that we did not expect? Right? Like, that's a different question than saying, hey, what drove the outcome? Whatever. Like that just a small little change to a question really begins to go, I think that, not that I'm good at making but when you get people thinking that way, like that's being curious in the questions you're asking.
We talk about the AAR, the after action review, but we hardly ever do it when we win. we do it when we lose, but what made it work and how can we have made it better, even if we were successful? And it gets people, I think, by developing this culture of curiosity, that it causes people not to fear failure as much, or to fear making a mistake. We're going to do the AAR, we're going to learn from it, and we're not going to make that mistake again. But it says, by being curious, I say, well, I wonder if we tried it this way. Oh, what if that failed? Well, don't be curious. Just do what you're told. Right. I really want you to do that. Yeah. I think another way to increase your curiosity is to increase the diversity of your team. Yeah. We talk a lot about diversity, equity, inclusion, these types of things, but leaders who really embrace the diversity of the team, and build a team of diverse people that are complementary to their own, but not the same. They're not like me. You can naturally be more curious because you're dealing with differences. Yeah. You think differently than me. You have a different come from than me. You have a different background than me. You have a different thought process than me. But if I have everybody like me, I don't really need to be curious because I already know how you think. If I really have a diverse team, the one way I can make them feel included, valued, like they belong, is to be curious and say, tell me how you see this. Yeah. How does your background, how would you handle this? What is your thought process on that? Yeah. Now I'm teachable again.
That makes me go back to something you've shared here on our podcast before about one of your early on experiences in a boardroom where your leader was like, well, Perry, if you think just like me, one of us is not needed. I'll let you guess who that is. The security team will escort you out. But, I was thinking about our team, and we have an individual on our team that thinks differently than I do. And you've been instrumental, kind of in mediating both sides of it, right? You're like, hey, you might need to pipe down a little bit there when you give Chris, and you're like, Chris, you probably ought to listen to some of the things. But what's been really good for me, and I absolutely love this individual and the way that they think and bring ideas and but it's diverse. It's different
Yeah.
than most of the makeup of my team. And it's really challenged the way
and we're better because of it.
and we're better because of it,
Yes.
100%.
Yeah.
And I hope she's better because of your coaching of how to communicate to me about it. But I have found myself going, man, like, that's interesting. Tell me more. Like, okay, what are you thinking about here? Well, how did that work? And brings a great perspective and allows me to be a little bit more curious in that on the team. Well, another one that we want to talk to you about increasing your curiosity is develop your active listening skills. And man, when curiosity shows itself, it's really truly the way that you listen. And when we talk about active listening, to your point, you can just ask a normal question and sit there and listen. But if you're going to be curious, you got to be engaged in that listening to dig more. And to your point just a minute ago, tell me more. And you really want to do it so that you're understanding, so that you can respond to them. And
Yeah, I've some of my favorite active listening tools are phrases like "tell me more," "what happened next," "then what did you do," and it reminds me to not get in such a hurry for my turn to talk. And so, am I really listening? Do I know the best next question to ask to draw the learning from this person? And I tell you the truth, this is a big truth that you really would help with your curiosity building, is that if you believe in your mindset, your heart set is that I can learn something from every person I meet. Doesn't matter what their stature in life, what their position, what they do for a living, how much money they do or do. I can learn from everyone I meet. I had knee surgery a few weeks ago. I was in PT first time this week, and I had this young kid. And my first thought was, what does he know? What could he possibly know? And then I had this thought. I've been working on this lesson, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to engage. And first of all, I'm making him feel something. What am I making him feel? So I smiled and I greeted him, and he was actually from another country, so it made the communication was a little difficult at first. But then I thought, how can I be curious? So finding out where was his family from, and then how did he get into this line of work? Realizing he was not as young as he appeared. He was actually pretty good at it. He knew his stuff. And then I started realizing, what can I learn from him? Which I thought was, I went in and I would not, but because I want to be more curious and thinking, I can learn something from every single person I meet. If I have that attitude, it just naturally ratchets up your natural curiosity.
Yeah, I love that. Well, listen, as we wrap up, I was sitting here listening to you and I was thinking about this. We are in the people business. And so all the examples we talked about from around curiosity were around engaging people and asking questions. There are so many resources out there for us when it comes to growth and personal growth, for you to be curious. Get outside of your industry to learn more. What I mean by that is go learn and be curious about how people are doing things that may work, inside your business. Be curious in everything that you're doing, your personal life, your professional life, engaging with people, but then also as you begin to have a personal growth plan. And what does that look like? Be curious of how people are doing things a little bit different instead of, just going along with the status quo. The other thing I'll as I kind of wrap up, I think this is one of two things in regards to competencies that leaders need to really, really focus on. I know that you called it a miracle skill, and it would be a miracle, literally, no pun intended, if we all became a little bit more curious. And we talk about we as human beings will judge people, by their actions without even being curious. We don't know what their intent was.
Right.
And so I would just challenge everybody that's listening to think about how do we become more curious. And the other thing is that I talk about often is how do we become more consistent? So it's the CCs. That's what I'm going to leave you with.
I love it.
How do we become more consistent in how we treat people, how we lead people, how we grow, and then how do we be more curious about the people that are around us, what we want to learn from them, and how we grow. And so if you take anything away from, Perry and I bringing this lesson to you, man, be more consistent and be more curious.
I love it. Consistency is one of my favorite words.
Hey, welcome back, Chris. I'm so glad, as I said earlier, to be in the studio with you. I love this quote just to kind of start us out today. I really don't even know who to attribute it to, but it says, "The best teachers show you where to look without telling you what to see."
That's awesome.
And isn't that true? I mean,
Yeah.
think about, for you and I think about somebody that was a teacher or a facilitator in our life.
Yeah.
It was what they showed us as much as what they told us.
Yeah.
And I love this lesson from John. I love digging into it and getting ready to go with you.
What I love about that, first of all, thanks for having me back. I know in the intro you said it had been a little while. I hadn't received an invite from Jake in some time, and so I wanted to talk to you about that.
You're back on trial.
But I'm back.
You're back
Yeah,
on
I'm
trial.
back. I don't know who didn't show up today, but I'm here to help you out. What I love about that is a statement of, teaching people is bringing the best out in them. And in that quote right there, you're driving curiosity in your people to get them to go look and to search versus telling them, and you're facilitating that growth in them in order to bring the best out.
So quick story on that. Again, it's Miss Richardson, for my third grade teacher. And she really served as a facilitator, but I remember her, and I don't remember what she taught me. I think I learned my multiplication tables back then, maybe. I think it may have been third, fourth, or fifth. But she taught me, I'm sure, how to read. But she taught me how to feel. She always told me, she says, you remind me of my son. You remind me of somebody very dear to me. And what she was really, Miss Richardson was really showing me was the best way to be a student in her class was to feel like a family member. And I learned so much that particular year. And again, think about the people in our life that has taught us or facilitated a lesson or a thought in our life. It all comes back to that point. They show us, they let us dig into it and find it more than they teach us.
And as leaders, one of the things we're looking for is not only to drive our curiosity and engagement, but to drive the engagement of those that are under our leadership, under our influence, whatever that might look like in your world. And so that's such a big driving factor when you talk to leaders is, how do I get my team more engaged? And what I love about where John is going with this is that we can be great leaders, but we need to be really, really, really good, great teachers in order to drive that engagement level. And so what I want to do is I want to just pick your brain for a minute. And I want you to share also a little bit about what you do in regards to the team. So as I was listening to John's message and we were preparing ahead of time, the first thing that came to mind under point number one, where John talks about it's not about you, it's about them, is you meet with our leadership team, your direct reports. On a monthly basis. You meet with us more than that, but on a monthly basis to really just cast the vision for the organization and talk about what's going on. But before we do any business, you spend 15, 20, depending if you're on a roll, 30, 45 minutes.
Keep going.
But you spend time just teaching us. And it's not about what you're learning or what you need to know. It's about what you have learned over the last 30 days that you think would add value to us, that you think would learn, that would help us as we learn. And so you spend time facilitating a conversation. It's interactive at times. Sometimes you're just teaching us. Talk about why you do that. And as long as I've known you, you've been doing that. Talk about why you do it, where maybe you learned it from, and then how you go about that and how you decide what it is that you want to facilitate or teach us so that it adds value to us as your direct reports in the room.
Well, I think it comes back to a real appreciation for any nugget that I get. I teach a lesson, a discovery, an enlightenment as a gold nugget. Because I do believe that if you shine it off, if you put it in your pocket, if you put it into your being, into your leadership, and you begin to use it, that consistency of use on that nugget is the thing that compounds influence in your life.
That's good.
Believe that with all of my heart. So it comes from a fundamental foundation that every podcast, and I'm looking right now to those of you that are tuning in to YouTube, every podcast, no matter how Southern, how don't and doesn't, and my contradictions contradict one another, I'm going to tell you, in every podcast, there is a nugget for you. It's the belief, Chris, that every message on a Sunday morning or every moment with John or every chance I get with a mentor or a facilitator in my life, there is something that's going to be deposited into me that with will give me great reward, great return. So, number one, you start there. Every moment, every lesson, everything that you are given is worth something if you will begin to use it. The second thing I would say, it really comes from hearing John teach about ACT all of our life.
Yeah.
Everything should have an application, apply, A. Everything should have something that you can change or do something a little bit better, a little bit different in your life. And everything should be given to you so that you can train or teach others the T.
Yeah.
So when I have a lesson, I believe that the lesson is, number one, meant to be taught in some frame of reference. So I walk into every leadership meeting and I go, what have I learned lately that I am responsible to give to my leadership team? What have I learned lately? I've got some upcoming leadership leadership meetings that's coming up soon. I already know the thoughts that I've just picked up recently that are intended, yes, for my betterment, but are intended so that I can share with others and see them improve too. And when you have those two fundamental philosophies in life, everything has something that is able to be mined, to be captured, to make better your life. And everything that you give is meant to be given to somebody else. And so you're right. I walk into every leadership meeting and I am thinking, what have I learned recently that should be transferred into this environment that I'm walking into?
And what I love about what you do with that is you process and you begin thinking about those nuggets, and then you transfer them into what is it that they need? Where is the team now? How do I take what I'm learning and make it very practical and applicable to where the team is as a whole? And it may be the entire team, or maybe certain team members, but you come in with that and you're already thinking about it for our next meeting. It could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, doesn't matter. You're already there and you're beginning to do that. And here's what that does for us as a receiver of that information. I read this statistic the other day that talked about when you teach, when you facilitate, when you develop your people, they are just organically going to be 17% more productive.
Wow.
Because you're doing that. And I think the beginning of those meetings, when you spend time doing that investment of time is showing up in a return on when we walk out of there. We are more inspired. We're more engaged. We want to enhance our productivity. We're buying in. And so I think this is, when John talks about this, I think this is just such a great point to make sure that we are teaching not just what we're learning, but what we're learning and how it applies to the leadership team.
And I want to say one more thing. I absolutely give it just to enrich your life, or to enrich the personalities, the people in each of the meetings. But on days that I am most effective with that, I'm able to attach it to the rest of the meeting agenda so that we can have corporate application to it as well.
That's good.
So it is absolutely an intent. I've been enriched. I'm better. Let me enrich and better others. But it also, on the days that I'm good, I'm better, I'm more successful, is the days that I can give team or corporate application to that too. So in a lot of ways, I'm just a facilitator of that content to make it make sense for the individual, but then to make it productive for the team as a whole in the agenda.
Which benefits them.
That's right.
Both of them benefits them. And so I am a receiver of that. And so listeners, as you're listening, or if you're watching us on YouTube, I want to encourage you to think about finding nuggets that you're learning and then finding opportunities to teach or facilitate that content to those that you have the privilege of leading, of influencing. Because our favorite statement around here, everyone deserves to be led well. Yeah. This is the key to start with when it comes to leading the people. And, John talks a lot about at level 2 influence in the 5 levels about connecting and building relationships with people. And I think when you add value to people, when you teach them like you do to us, we immediately get connected to you. We get connected to you. We get connected to the people that are in the room. And so the power of this lesson is so strong. Just this first point, and we got 3 more to go. Yeah. But just this first point as a leader is something you need to be paying attention to.
Hey, don't let everybody, people listening to the podcast, don't let anybody scare you. I didn't say this in my opening notes. This is part 1, so we won't do 3 today.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
we'll just do 1. Some of you were looking at your clock saying, my workout's about over.
We just lost all of our listeners. We saw just a drastic drop at this mark. So, all right, the next point I want to talk about is point 2. And you have sat with John, and I've been a privilege to learn from John and from you at this, where it talks about studying your students. And talk about, as you've learned and been mentored from John as a leader, when you're getting ready to go speak, when you're getting ready to go teach, when you're getting ready to go facilitate, what goes through your mind? How do you begin to understand and study the students so that what you're delivering is very impactful to them and where they're at?
Give me. I just talked about time. Now, give me a few minutes to build this out, okay, Chris? I'm going to build it out on the personal level, like you just asked me, but I'm also going to build it out on my business model. And podcast listeners, I believe your business model. And so, first, let me say on a personal level, I remember I was with John. John tells this story now publicly all around the world. I was with John when he was getting ready to speak to about 8,000 people. It was about 7,900 to be exact, and a young kid came up to him, flashy, a really good guy that John and I actually were going to stay after. We had changed our plane, we'd changed our flight schedule, all of that stuff to stay and listen to this incredible up-and-coming, rising communicator. And he came up to John with full of zest and energy, and he said, John, can I just get in your head for a minute? And, there was a little over-the-top kind of emotion, so I kind of perked up. And John said, sure, anything I can help you. And he said, what are you thinking about right now? Now, John was going on stage in 2 minutes, and John went, I'm thinking about the people. And he said, the people? He said, you're not thinking about your opening act, what you're going to say, how you're going to place your hands? And John said, no. He said, you're not thinking about your content? John said, no. John said, I'm thinking about the people. He said, I've already thought about my content. Yeah. In some cases, I've been thinking about my content for 20, 30 years. I'm thinking about the people and where are they and what is their posture and how am I going to help them? And it struck me, and now John teaches that with great efficiency and great poignancy when he goes, when you walk on stage, you shouldn't be thinking about content. You should be thinking about the people. Now, John illustrates that later on in this point, and please go back and listen if you got it. I'm not going to repeat John. But you should not be preparing your content right before you go on stage. That should have already been done. Right. You should be preparing your connectivity quotient. How and what is connection with this audience going to look like? Let me talk about our business plan. Yeah. Several years ago, in fact, it was 40 years ago, John was challenged by Les Parrott and said, John, you need to write a book. John, I don't want to write a book. I don't want to be an author. And he said, you will be able to impact people with your written word that you never was able to if you don't write a book. Well, that struck John's fancy. John was not interested in writing books. And so 40 years ago, John began writing a book so that he would be able to help people he would never meet. Well, 87 books later, 36 million pairs of hands have held a John Maxwell book. I think it was a good strategy. Yeah. Just like that, Chris, we began realizing that if we really wanted to make an impact in companies, in teams, we were going to have to partner with people to make them empowered and effective to where they could impact people in places we would never go as a business strategy. And so we started this initiative that really it's all about facilitating. It's empowering women and men in an environment where they like that environment, but they want to see that environment better. Yeah. And they want to see their influence in that environment grow. Yeah. They want the environment better. They want their influence in that environment to grow. Okay. Now, already some of you are going, yeah, that's me. That's me. I need my environment better, and I want my influence to grow. And so John and I began, in fact, let me distance myself. John started before me realizing that there was a strategy that we should employ on how to empower people in a team, in a company that wanted to see the company, the people in the company better, and wanted to see their influence increased. So we started programs to help facilitators. That's what we call them. Yeah. That's an internal language. Don't let that scare you. We started a program that would allow people to be facilitators, that would take content, we would train them, we would equip them, they would take that content, and then they would better the people in that environment. Sounds a little bit like our opening line at the podcast, right? We add value to people. Yeah. Let me say it differently. We add value to facilitators so that the facilitators will multiply value to others. And I just want to take a moment right here. This is off script, so just give me a moment, Chris. And I want to talk a little bit about this facilitation because, number one, you work with facilitators in some of the best companies in the world, the most respected companies in their industry. You work with people in those companies that are facilitators. Yeah. And I want you to, one, go off script a little bit, although it's right on script. And I want you to talk a little bit about the power of facilitation that you see in our corporate relationships on corporate teams in corporate environments.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I get the privilege to ride shotgun with some of our excellent executive facilitators, but then also organizations that have facilitators that are on their learning and development teams, and we just come alongside and help them. I think what's so powerful about what John thought about a long time ago and then you've helped implement is when you become a teacher, when you become a facilitator of content, it inspires trust within those people. And we talked a little bit about how it connects you with people, but so many organizations right now are losing people out the back door, good team
Yeah.
members,
Yep.
because it's shifting a little bit about what's important to them. I was reading the other day, I think it was a Harvard Business Review article where just on U.S. businesses, and I know we have an international audience, and that number's unfortunately going to be bigger if we looked at it from international. But I was reading the other day, and it talked about how there's so much voluntarily leaving because around not alignment and purpose, but more importantly, not developing them, not teaching them, not facilitating content to them, that it's costing U.S. businesses over $650 billion dollars annually. And that just breaks your heart. It breaks my heart. It breaks John's heart, because we want to be able to add value to people. And if leaders would be able to do that, even from a facilitation standpoint, it would drastically change your organization, increase the productivity. It would enhance the culture inside the organization. So we said, hey, we've got to figure this out.
Sure.
And so one of the things that we love doing is that we provide content through John's principles, and we help create facilitation techniques and teaching techniques. And back to point number 2, how do you learn about those that are going to be in your room, your students, before they get in there? How do you go about that so that when you do teach them, you're able to connect with them? And so now we have the privilege of not only working with our facilitators and facilitator in an organization, but with people that have a desire, that are in organizations right now or their communities, that want to facilitate content to improve the culture, improve their lives, to add value to them. We provide the content. We help them with facilitation and teaching techniques. What do you do before? What do you do during? What do you do after?
Awesome.
All of that.
Awesome. And, let me put it out there in podcast land, because you think it's been a long time since Chris Scott's been here since the last time. It's going to be a long time perhaps again.
Yeah.
Because my goal, the vision that I've put out in front of our team, is I want 25,000 companies around the world to have a Maxwell facilitator in that company. Somebody that knows how to, with tools, resources, with support, knows how to make the company better, make the people in the company better, and wants to grow their influence in that organization. And so here's what I'd love to do, Chris, and we'll put this in the show notes. I'll mention it at the end of the show as well. Go to maxwellpodcast.com/facilitator. maxwellpodcast.com/facilitator, and you'll be able to get a lot more information. Some of you are ready now. Some of you want to gather the information, go back to your company and see if they will sponsor you, be a part of this, if they'll catch the vision. But we're looking for champions.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to this point that you've got to study your students. So many of us that are executives, Chris, you're an executive, I'm an executive in a growing company. We lose touch with our people. And yet facilitators seem to know where the people are and facilitate. And that's kind of how John wraps the second point up, is you got to know where your people are rather than expecting your people to come to you. One of the ways to know your people is to get facilitators down into the lifeblood of the organization, which will be closer to the pulse.
One of the things, as we kind of wrap up today, and you can hear our passion about this and adding value to people to be able to teach and facilitate others. When I think back about some of the greatest teachers that I've ever had, you mentioned your third grade teacher, they really facilitated our learning.
That's right.
And I think each one of you that are listening, maybe watching us today, you can think about, if I asked you that question, what teacher, what facilitator had the greatest impact on you? There are probably multiple people that come to mind. And our desire is to help you get there for somebody someday to look at it and go, hey, man, Mark Cole, he was that teacher. He was that facilitator. As you wrap up, I know one of the things you do under point number 2 about studying your students is you spend time every week, which we sometimes challenge you on this as the CEO. We're like, Mark, every week? But you really go and listen to our facilitators, to our people, and you hear from them. You learn what are the content pieces that we need to be developing in order to serve them well in the field, and where they're at and where they're struggling. All things. Talk a little bit about the power of that in regards to you as a leader inside our organization to be able to provide more information for them.
Well, it goes with this standout statement that I want to make sure that you get from this lesson, and it's touch a heart before you ask for a hand. We've heard John say that. But facilitation, connecting with I'm no more than a facilitator every week when you in this environment to where I reach out to our speakers, our trainers, our coaches, our facilitators. I'm no more than a facilitator at that point. Now, some people call me the CEO. Some people call me the visionary. But in that environment, I'm just a facilitator. I'm just trying to understand. And here's what happens as a facilitator. I love this reciprocal impact that happens. I come with a lesson. But by the time I'm done, not only from the lesson that I've studied, prayer, it's helped me, but from the interaction, I, as the facilitator, began to grow and expand in that environment as well. John says that true leaders, he said this in the lesson today, true leaders go find the people, not expect the people to come find them. And one of my greatest experiences was 6 years ago when I decided to become a facilitator in our own environment. Now I've facilitated outside. I've worked with clients. I've done all that stuff. I grew up in the organization. Remember, I've kind of done it all. But that day that in my positional leadership, I was a positional leader at that time. I was the CEO. And 6 years ago, I said, you know what? I'm going to dedicate every Tuesday to facilitation. I'm going to be a facilitator every Tuesday. Yeah. Chris, 3 weeks into that commitment, 3 weeks in, was the most liberating thing that I've ever had as a leader. See, I thought, this is such a Lone Ranger statement, I thought I was the only one that had passion for John's legacy and our future because I'd been here for, at that point, 18 years. And I've fired up and I'm all in, and I've had these spiritual experiences that I've shared on this podcast of I knew I was called to availability and proximity to John. I get on this call and I get into the lifeblood of the organization through facilitation, and I find out the greatest discovery. There were people throughout the entire organization that had just as much passion for our vision, our legacy, and our sustainability than I had. Now, that was a hard pill for me to take at first because I wore my badge with pride.
Yeah.
And then I realized there was no badge. I was just a part of a huge community.
Yeah.
I went to where the people were, and where the people were was exactly where I wanted them to be. And I kept thinking I had to get them through inspiration and motivation and instruction. And yet, really all I needed to do is to get in proximity, which is what facilitation does. You get into proximity and you find out where your people are.
Yeah.
And for me, I've done it recently. I shared in the last few weeks about some recent family rooms that I did. That was all an intent to go to where the people are. And if there's one great takeaway from our lesson today that John's teaching us, and we'll be back next week for part 2, if I can get Chris to show up again. That's the little jury's out on that. But great leaders are great teachers. And what John's really saying is positional leaders are best when they come in and get connected at the same level with the people that they're trying to lead. And I love that.
What was the one that had the greatest gap that when you began to journal out and write it down and say, man, there's a statement that of this, but that's really not what I believe after I've spent some time with a blank sheet of paper and have grown through this process? What was the one that just stuck out in your mind the most that you became aware of?
Oh gosh, it feels like I feel like you're asking me to choose between my favorite children right now. Yeah. So many of the principles feel so near and dear to me, but I think if I'm honestly just kind of going more chronologically, I think a lot of the mindset around having goals, visualizing what the end goal is, kind of breaking it down, having objectives before you go into a situation, being critical to your success, as opposed to having some white space and some true curiosity and freedom on the front side. And for me in my journey, I had a lot of, shame might be like a strong word, but when I moved to Uganda, I did not have a plan. I did not have a goal. I did not have a vision. I did not have a job. I did not have money. All of the things that would be like, hey, this would do you well to set you up for success. I had none of that. And I think in the moment I felt like, man, I'm clueless. I'm a loser. I don't have an objective. Like, what am I? There would be days where I would wake up and it would just be the white blank space of nothingness, right? Of like, I don't have a job. There are no expectations. I don't have a goal. I got in my head at times and I'm like, what am I doing here? I'm like wasting time. All of my friends, we just graduated from college and they're all off and they're on the track and they're setting goals and they're getting jobs and they're getting promotions. And what I can see so clearly in hindsight is that was the greatest gift. Actually, when you don't have an objective, when you don't have a preconceived idea in mind, what that allows you to do is to become actually truly curious. And I really liken it, the analogy that I like to use is around becoming an investigative journalist in your own life. Because so often we come up with these ideas and we're like, I want to do this. This is the product I want to create. This is the team I want to create. This is the mission I want to create in the world, whatever. And when we get emotionally attached to our ideas, what ends up happening is we may ask questions, but we're really hoping we get a certain answer to that question, right? And we might only be asking the questions that we think are gonna, it's called confirmation bias, confirm what we're already hoping the world needs from us, or this product that people supposedly really need, or this problem in the world. When you truly come to a place where there is white space and blank space, and you can be truly unbiasedly curious, that can actually be a superpower. You are going to be able to see needs, to see opportunity, to see problems in a way that other people can't because they're so narrowly focused on only getting information that's going to align with what they already believe. That not only does that not make you, aimless or left behind or whatever narrative you might be telling yourself, that could actually be your superpower as a leader, a visionary, and a creator.
That is so good. I think what you're saying too, in today's world, you removed yourself, right, from so many distractions and were able to discover that. And now I think leaders, their own personal journey, also leaders of teams and people of family, communities, volunteers, there are so many distractions that if we were to say, wipe away the slate and start at the beginning, there's a lot of undoing that has to happen.
Yeah.
And I think in today's society, we could do a better job of leading our families, of our organizations, of our teams, and could accomplish even more if we would apply and put in action what I believe is what you're going to communicate to the team on March 13th. And then obviously in the book that you've written, I love the principle.
I love what you said about how you can say that it's, hey, I have this vision, but you immediately make that shift.
Yep.
And I think if you just become just aware of that, leaders, and as you're communicating, you may not even be leading a team, maybe in the community, maybe it's your family, just be aware of that. And I think it'll help you as you begin to connect with them. So what I'd like to do is we'll jump into like 2 or 3 of the 7 ways that John talks about common ground. And the first one I want to talk about, this is something that, we know a guy that, as talked about, wrote a book, Good Leaders Ask Great Questions, is to really be curious. And I want to unpack this a little bit around the thought of, man, how do we ask more questions and assert less? How do we understand their why and don't get caught up in the what, right? And the only way to do that is, you don't have to agree on everything, but the only way to do that is to ask questions. And you do this. You've seen it from your mentor for a long time. As you're leading now, I've even seen it more. And talk about the importance of that so that you're creating that common ground with the team.
Yeah, for years I've noticed, and maybe it was writing the book, Good Leaders Ask Great Questions, because I asked John, I say at my age, he's 20 years my senior or a little bit more, and I go, at my age, did you ask questions like you ask now? And he says no. But as long as I've observed his leadership from this angle the last 13, 14 years, he asked great questions. I asked him one day, I said, is it the book Good Leaders Ask Great Questions that prompted you to be so inquisitive in meetings?
Good question.
And he said, yes, it absolutely was the research of that, and it was maturity. He said, when I was young, I thought I had to have all the answers. I was always the answer man. Half my answers were not correct, but I always had an answer. He said, as I've gotten older, I've found that very rarely do I have the best answer. Now, that struck me.
Yeah.
And he's been challenging me, I would say, I think I've admitted on this podcast, that he's been challenging me for several years to ask better questions, that I would get to answers quicker, that I would get collaboration much better, and that I would get buy-in a much greater level of buy-in if I would ask questions, because people feel like they contributed to the final decision. But I don't feel like I've done a great job of it, Chris. But recently, what I have discovered is that vision is very much an interpretation of where one sits from their particular perspective.
Sure.
And so you'll notice, and you mentioned this just a moment ago before we started recording, I have started asking questions. Hey, what did you just hear me say? How do you interpret what we're talking about right now? And I have really been intentional because I think it's critical when you are having a U-turn part in your organization to make sure people are understanding at each leg of the way. And the only way to know if somebody understands is not a head nod, is not a, okay, good meeting, is not a word of affirmation. The only way to really see if somebody understands is get them to repeat what they just heard.
Yeah. And I've heard you also say, just a couple more questions to add to this, is like, do you think we're heading down the right path with this conversation? Would you go a different, and like you begin to have those questions so that they not only are answering what they recall, but what they are thinking as well, right? And so again, it is definitely curiosity, and it's helping leaders connect, and they get the buy-in.
Yeah,
there.
before we get off of this one, one of the things I love about John is he will come in and say, what do I need to know?
Yeah.
And I'll give him what I believe that he needs to know. And then he'll listen and say, is there any more context? Another question. I give him more context. And then he makes a decision. This is the route that we need to go. But after he does that, he follows it back up. You've heard me say this before.
Yeah.
You've seen him say this before. He'll go, what am I missing?
Yeah.
He'll give the decision and then ask another question, which I think is just
That's
brilliant.
great. Yeah, I love that.
I want to begin my talk. I'm going to really talk about personal growth. But I want to begin my talk by asking you two questions. And these two questions I ask often because the way that you answer these really determines how well you lead and how well you really develop yourself. And the two questions are, what are you doing to develop yourself? In other words, what are you doing to grow yourself? That's what we're going to talk about today. That's all about personal growth. And then the second question is what are you doing to develop others? And developing others is a lot about leadership. And so you're going to find that leadership and personal growth will be continually connected and intertwined in our conversation today as I talk to you, because they're so vital to your success. And you see, when you become successful, when you personally grow, and when you develop others and lead them well, it not only helps you, but of course it helps thrive, and it helps your mission and your vision and your purpose and your cause. And so it's just a wonderful thing. I wrote a book several years ago called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And I want to use as a foundation for my teaching today two of those laws, because they aren't the two most important laws. I think all the laws are essential, but they're two laws that I think really help us understand why we need to grow ourselves and develop ourselves. The first law is the law of the lid. It's probably the most famous of the 21 laws. And basically, the law of the lid simply says how well you lead determines how well you succeed. In other words, there's a relationship between my ability to lead you and my ability to be successful in life. There's a relationship between your ability to lead others and being successful in life. I love the visual illustration I use with the law of the lid. It's just very simple. Let's say for teaching purposes today, I'm an average leader, okay? So between a 1 and 10, I'm a 5. So this hand is my leadership lid. This is how well John Maxwell leads at this moment. These are my leadership skills. Now, what I want you to know is that if this is my leadership lid, this is how well I lead right now, and it's a 5, it's average from a 1 to a 10, then my business, in this case, thriving, my business is going to come under that lid, but it cannot rise any higher. There's a lid on my potential, and that lid is my leadership. So if my leadership lid is a 5, then in thriving in my business, I'm going to be about a 4. That's going to be the extent of it. And I know that to be a fact because everything rises and falls on leadership, and history teaches us that whether it's in business, religion, education, government, that the people can go no further than what the leader has the ability to lead them. And so that's why I'm so passionate about teaching leadership. The reason I've been doing it for 50 years now is because I know that everything rises and falls on leadership. And even what I know better and more is the fact that you can become a better leader. In other words, You can take your leadership lid, which in this illustration is a 5, which means my business is a 4, and you can raise it. You can go from a 5 to a 6 to a 7. Well, maybe after time and a lot of work and intentionality, maybe you can get to an 8. Now, you see, the moment I lift my lid in leadership, I now have room to grow my business. And it can go from a 4 to 5 to 6 to 7. And so people ask me all the time, John, how do I really grow my business and my company? I say, well, grow your leaders. When you grow your leaders, they'll grow your business. That's the way it works. And that's a very important law. And when we talk about personal growth and developing ourselves, again, I just would, as your friend, challenge you, make a real intentional commitment to develop your leadership. It's just so essential to your success in life. I've written a lot of books, and I've written a lot of leadership books, but when people ask me, where do I start? I just really suggest that they start with Developing the Leader Within You 2.0. This is a life-changing book. It's helped literally millions of people learn how to lead. It's the best leadership book I've written on just how to get started as a leader. It talks about 10 basic things that you and I need to do to lead well. So if you're wanting to grow that area, perhaps that's a book that you'll want to look at, Developing the Leader Within You 2.0. But there's another law that I want to talk about briefly today, and that's the law of process. And the law of process just simply says leaders develop daily, not in a day. I think that many times we overestimate the event, the moment, the book, and we underestimate the process. And the law of process just basically says you and I don't develop as leaders quickly. We don't do it after one lecture like this, or we don't do it after we've read one book or gone to one leadership seminar. It's more than an event. It's a process. And if we want to be really committed to develop our leadership skills and raise that lid, again, what we really want to do is we want to be committed to consistency in intentionally developing ourselves as leaders. That's been my commitment, and that's my commitment to you to help you to really understand this entire process, because it doesn't happen quickly. So when people come and they hear me speak maybe, and they pick up 3 or 4 of my books and they walk out of the conference, and it's kind of like, I am a leader. Well, no, you're just a person that has some leadership books. It's going to take some time, and it's okay. Shortcuts don't pay off in the long run. And when you and I have the big picture, and when we see more than others see, and when we see before others see, and that's a common characteristic of leaders, then we'll understand and be willing to go through this process. You see, the question is now not how fast can I become a leader, but it's really how far can I go? And that farness is all about consistency and process. And I say that because what I'm about to teach you about personal growth is a continual journey. It's not, again, the points that I'm going to give you, and you write them down, you think about them, and boom, you just grow personally. Too many times we want magic, and what we really need to do is just be committed to the process. And so let's just talk about how that happens. You see, if you sit down with me at lunch and you say, John, I really want to have a good future, what advice would you give me about my good future? I would just say to you that the only guarantee that you and I have that tomorrow is going to get better than today is that we are growing today. My growth today determines my success tomorrow. You see, every day you and I are either preparing or repairing. You see, if we're preparing every day, we're committed to this process and we're setting up tomorrow for success. If we're repairing, basically what that means is that we haven't continually on a consistent basis growing. And so we're having to go back and fix yesterday all the time. So we're either forward moving by preparing or having to kind of oops and go back and repair. And this process of growth that I'm going to share with you now just will allow you to prepare and make sure that your future is bright. You see, my life changed when I was in my 20s, when I had a mentor over breakfast share with me that if I was going to grow, it was going to have to be intentional. He said, growth isn't automatic, John. You've got to grow on purpose. And I thought, wow, I don't even have a plan for growth, and I need to find one, and then I need to be purposeful in it, and I need to continually grow. And that set me up on a journey, a growth journey, that at the age of 74, I'm still on, and I'm still enjoying, and I'm still learning, I'm still expanding, I'm still growing, I'm still developing, I'm still asking questions, I'm still curious. And I want that for you, and it can be for you. But there is a process, and when I realized that personal growth was going to be an intentional commitment that I made on a daily basis the rest of my life, I began to understand that there are growth environments that add to that, and there are some places that would detract from it. You see, I belonged, for example, to an organization that didn't have a growth mindset. Okay, I had a lot of desire to develop myself, but I wasn't around people who had any desire to develop themselves. In fact, when Kirk Campmeyer told me that growth was not automatic and you had to have a plan for personal growth, I know in the next 6 months, I went to 300 people around me, my friends, and I asked them what their plan for growth was, and not one of them had a plan for growth. And they were like me. I think they just assumed that if they just kind of went to work every day, that it was kind of automatic that they would just get better, which is not true. And it was that time of asking questions and I came to a conclusion that I wasn't in a growth environment. Now, what am I going to do? Because I want to be in a growth environment. I want to be around people that are going to enhance this passion I have to develop myself. But I wasn't fortunate to be in that environment. And in my 20s, I sat down and I spent a period of time, a good period of time, just asking myself, what does a growth environment look like to me? What do I want in a growth environment? And that's what I'm going to share with you. What's interesting is almost 50 years later, what I'm going to share with you was birthed when I was in my 20s, and I've just found it to hold strong throughout time. It's still relevant. It's still clear.
Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results.